very big thank you to Heidi for being here today. And I'm going to turn the screen right over to her.
Well, thank you so much, Donna. Thank you so much for hosting this, even though it's virtually, and thank you all for joining. I know it's a really beautiful day outside today, so thanks for taking the time to join me. I have a pretty extensive presentation for you this afternoon, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So our agenda today includes information regarding the entire system, leak history, solutions, go and no-go decision points, how we got to today, the system management plan, shutdown operations, and possibly a few questions at the end. So first, a quick overview of the system. So this is a very large, robust water system because it needs to be. It is primarily a surface water supply system. It's comprised of 19 reservoirs and 3 controlled lakes. System capacity is 570 billion gallons of storage total throughout the whole system. It delivers about 1.1 billion gallons of water every day to half the population of New York State, or 9.8 million people. That's 8.8 million people in the city and about another million people north of New York City in different counties that we have infrastructure in that we have municipalities tapping into. The entire system is about 2,000 square miles and is spread out through 8 upstate counties and a tiny piece of Connecticut too. The Delaware Aqueduct, which is what we're going to discuss today, is 85 miles long. It runs from the Rondout Reservoir all the way down to Hillview Reservoir in Yonkers. It is the longest tunnel in the world. It conveys about 50% of New York City's drinking water. The Delaware Aqueduct was put into service in 1944, and it was last fully drained and inspected between 1957 and 1958. So it's been a really long time since it's been taken out of service. And obviously, it's a critical system component. It consists of 3 different segments. So can everyone see my cursor here? I'm pretty sure you can. The Rondout, so we have the Rondout to West Branch.
Don't see your screen, Heidi.
You don't see my screen?
No.
Donna, are you able to see it says I'm sharing.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Sorry to bother you.
No worries. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so we have the Rondout to West Branch segment. Then we have the West Branch. Sorry, there's a train here. West Branch to Kensico, and then the Kensico to Hillview. So there's 3 different segments to the system. Back in the early 1990s, Central Hudson discovered a bubbling surface expression near their site along the Hudson River. There was also another leak identified in 1992 in the town of Wawarsing in Ulster County. Between both the leaks, it is estimated that approximately 30 million gallons of water is leaking out of the tunnel per day. That number is dependent on what the flow is going through the tunnel. So the more water we're pushing through the tunnel, the higher the leak is going to be. The less flow through the tunnel, the less the leak is going to be. Approximately 95% of the leak is in the area of Roston and Newburgh. The leak in Wawarsing is much smaller, and it's clearly taken DEP a very long time to get to this point, and we'll get to discussing that reason in a little bit. Let me just go back here. So the reason for the leak itself was that when we first put in the Delaware Aqueduct back in the 1940s, we hit limestone. But the limestone was already a known issue. There's a steel interlining that was installed in part of the aqueduct, but we didn't extend it far enough. So when we got down there to that Hudson River section, it said that it's a result of a shortage of steel due to World War II. So the portion that goes under the Hudson did not have a steel lining. So apparently, where we didn't extend it far enough, the limestone has started to erode the concrete, which caused the leaking in the aqueduct. The steel interlining is also going to play another component, a very critical component, as we install the new tunnel. And so this area here, this slide shows all of the areas of concern that we're going to be discussing. As you can see, the leak in Wawarsing, as well as the section under the Hudson River here. This is where we've installed the new bypass line down there in the Roaston area. And this is where it was originally, the surface expression was originally identified. So we've done an extensive investigation. These pictures are from the early 2000s through 2015. And although work was done prior to these photos, I just chose these because there are some good pictures.
It started. All right.
That shows some of the work we've already done. So what we did was we used ROVs and AUVs that look like mini torpedoes that have cameras on them. So these devices, we dropped them down into the shafts, down into the aqueduct while the water was still flowing. And we were able to take some really good 365-degree views just to see where the leak was and potentially how bad it was leaking. So here we are with the solution. How do you fix this? So there were a lot of suggested solutions and a lot of investigative work that went into this. But ultimately, what was settled on was that we needed to put in a new bypass tunnel. The leak in Wawarsing wasn't as bad as the section that's underneath the Hudson. When we shut down the aqueduct, the portion that's going under the Hudson, the leak in Wawarsing is going to be fixed at that time, and that leak only requires some grouting. It doesn't require replacement or anything like that. It's just some grout work to repair that leak. However, the leak that is here in the Newburgh area under the Hudson, that is where we've had to bore a new 2.5-mile long tunnel that goes underneath the Hudson. It's actually already there. It is a new bypass tunnel, this yellow section here, 2.5 miles long. When the final connection is made, the old tunnel will be abandoned in place. What we have already done are these two shafts going down on both sides. So here, this 700 feet down, 900 feet down, and all of this yellow here, this has already been done. And the last of the work that needs to be done are these two small connections, these two small like elbow pieces here on each end. They still need to be connected to the old aqueduct. So the water is going to come down, hit these two little connection pieces, and travel through here and back to here. The Delaware Aqueduct Bypass is the longest and most complex repair project in the history of the water supply. The total program cost is approximately $1 billion, and the goal of the project is to either fix or eliminate the big leaks that we have, both in Wawarsing and Roaston. We are going to accomplish this by connecting the 2.5-mile tunnel underneath the Hudson River. We are expecting it to be completed in 2025, with the shutdown starting in October 1st of this year. So that would be October 1st, 2024. This slide shows things in a little more detail. So like I said, the actual bypass tunnel is complete. We've already bored it. The shorter connections on each end need to be finished, and that's what needs to be completed. The original section of the aqueduct needs to be taken out of service, so it cannot be running, and the pressure needs to be taken off that old aqueduct section, the whole aqueduct, as it's a pressure tunnel. In order for us to bore through it and make those final little elbow connections, everything has to be, the aqueduct has to be shut down. And currently our contractors are estimating for them to complete the work between 5 and 8 months. The repairs were mostly complete in 2021, and now we're ready to connect and make those two little final connections, and that final decision will come in June of this year. Once we make the decision to shut down, we will have to dewater and take the pressure off of the tunnel. We will attach those two other sections, and while it's shut down, we'll also be doing the grouting work in Wawarsing. We'll fix that leak there. And again, this is anticipated to take between 5 and 8 months. So how did we get to today? The system's water supply management plan during the shutdown operations has been nearly 20 years in the making. There have been a lot of conservation measures implemented in this city to be able to promote lower demand, lower usage of water so that we can use the other two parts of the system, the Catskill and the Croton system, so that we will be able to meet the demand during the shutdown. There's many precursor capital projects that needed completion, including a $200 million repair and rehabilitation of the Catskill Aqueduct. We also have our community customer water supplies. So there's a lot of people who rely on the water besides New York City. Anywhere that we have infrastructure in the counties besides Dutchess County, by law, those communities are allowed to tap into the New York system and buy water from us at a wholesale rate. If we shut down the Delaware Aqueduct and those communities, it's their primary water source, we need to make sure that those communities can still get water for the 5 to 8 month period. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into making sure that they're ready for the shutdown. We placed hundreds of interconnected and satellite-linked ground movement monitors at primary leak sites, and we were monitoring residential wells that could potentially be impacted by leak-influenced aquifers in Newburgh. I also just want to make sure that everyone is aware that there was a shutdown management plan that was subject to a full environmental review pursuant to the State Quality Environmental Review Act and the secret process, which also included a public process. That was included in all of the plans and all of the designs and operations going into this. Getting to today. The shutdown and bypass tunnel connection could not be completed when the tunnel was constructed, and it was delayed in 22, 23, and is scheduled for October 1st this year. It is to ensure adequacy and redundancy of supplies for the communities north of the city, and to finalize a new connection between the Croton system and the city water supply system in the Bronx. We also had to do some upgrading to our pumping stations in the Hudson Valley, at Croton Falls and Cross River. So this is a list of all of the names of the projects that needed to be completed before we were able to do the shutdown. These are all capital construction projects, which entail contracts and a very long bureaucratic process that facilitates them. I'm not going to go through all of the projects, but just know that there's been a lot of work that's gone into the last 20 years. We haven't just been sitting idly by waiting to get this done. A lot of work has already been completed with that $1 billion number. It does not include the money that went into all of these precursory projects. Again, the shutdown management plan was a very extensive process. It took us a few years to complete. We had to do investigations to figure out where the leaks were coming from. We had to come up with a solution on how to design a new tunnel. We had to do the designs for it. We had to go through the secret process. Then we had to figure out how we were going to operate the system while we were shut down. This is a public information document. It can be found on our website. And there's a whole chapter 10 that includes a proposed Water for the Future shutdown system operations. It's actually a 429-page document that was subject to secret and open for public comment. I understand that it's been a long time since then, and some of you have seen this. It's been a long time since the public comment period. I just want to highlight the amount of work that went into and everything that's occurred in the city. So this blue line that you see here is the New York City demand. The population is the green line. As you can see, even with 1 million or more people on the system, our demand in the city has dropped greatly. And we could credit this drop in demand due to the implementation of low flow toilets, shower head replacement programs, the front loading washers. All of these things use less water. These items, combined with informational campaigns that the city has launched, raise awareness about how they use their water and they've all been very beneficial. One of the biggest drivers in all of this is the universal meter reading. The city installed new water meters so that people could really see how much water they were using and they were being accurately charged for the amount of water they were using. This resulted in one of the biggest reasons water demand significantly dropped over the years, even while population climbed to over 1 million people on the system. Let's look into how operations are going to be with the shutdown management plan. The purpose behind the shutdown management plan was to provide the operations of the system. However, during the shutdown itself, the goal is to provide uninterrupted, high-quality water to DEP's customers. I understand that north of the city, there are concerns that include flooding and fisheries, and we'll get to some of those concerns as well. This is the water supply augmentation. I think one of the biggest questions is that if we're going to take the Delaware Aqueduct out of service, how does New York City plan to get its water for 5 to 8 months while half of the supply is out? So we did a big project called the CAT R&R to rehabilitate the Catskill Aqueduct to restore service. This included sending people into the aqueduct with squeegees to remove biofilm off the walls of the aqueduct to improve capacity. We anticipate 600 million gallons per day out of the Catskill system. We've done several max flow tests, and we feel we can increase that flow if needed. The 2 pumping stations at Cross River and Croton Falls are part of the Croton system. Since the Delaware system is going to be removed from service between the Rondout West Branch section, there remains a branch that will go from West Branch to Kensico. These 2 pumping stations have the ability to take Croton water and pump it into the Delaware Aqueduct below the West Branch and send it into Kensico. This allows us to take more water out of the Croton system than we normally have. These 2 pumping stations have always existed as part of our drought management plan for years. They got big upgrades leading to this shutdown. This was one of the predecessor projects, and this was necessary so that we could maximize the use of the Croton system. The Croton filtration plant is up and running, and it can maximize out at about 290 million gallons per day. We are expecting to utilize that during the shutdown. So now we're getting to the point once again where we're gearing up to make a decision to move forward with the shutdown. We need to be able to tell our contractors, yes, gear up and mobilize everybody, get them to the site. Let's get prepped and ready to go for October 1st. So what is going to lead us to making that decision? Water supply hydrologic conditions, infrastructure conditions, and having everything in working order. If, for whatever reason, if we are not seeing those things come together, the decision will be no-go for this year, and the shutdown will be delayed once again to the same time frame next year. The reason for the October to May time frame is that it's the lowest demand period in the winter time, whereas in the summertime, the demand for water is much higher. System-wise, we need to make sure that the Catskill system and the Croton system have very good water supply in them to be able to sustain the demand during the 5 to 8 month shutdown period. A few slides from now, I will explain to you what will happen to these systems and what they're going to potentially look like. One of our triggers is that the inflow must be greater than 6.5 billion gallons to be able to shut down the Croton system. Most of the years we exceed that. We are currently predicted to exceed that number based on the information we currently have. So this slide, I understand, has some predictions from 2023. I'm only using this slide as an example. And as we go forward, this information will upgrade. We use a lot of tools in this process. Weather forecasting, we take a look at it long-term, short-term, seasonally, and annually. There are a lot of different intervals in these products and in what they put out. Our partners at the NOAA Weather Service and the National Weather Service in NOAA. We will continue to utilize these tools as we do for our normal daily operations. We will be bringing in more forecasting tools. We've brought them in over the last year, and we're also using IBM Weather Underground. Columbia University is also helping us with weather prediction so that we have more tools in our toolkit, even more than ever before. We've been testing them out over the past few years to see how well they can interpret information that are going to be used for the operations. I know that one of the biggest questions you have is, what if something happens during the shutdown? That question is really dependent on where we are in the process. There are different phases of construction that will hit during the shutdown. We will be having a meeting every single day, every morning, probably at 8 a.m., just like we've done for all of the predecessor projects, explaining what the conditions are and whether we are still a go, no-go, and what our current bailout time is. The bailout time is how long would it take for us to return the Delaware Aqueduct back into service. And that time really varies depending on where we are in the construction process. The bailout time could be anywhere from 1 to 9 weeks to be able to turn the aqueduct back on. Every day, the bailout time changes, and that's one of the biggest things we track operationally is the bailout time and how long will it take to place the aqueduct back into service. There are 2 pumping stations, the Catskill Aqueduct and the Croton water filtration plant. These things need to be working. They need to be running at max capacity. If we do not have that running, we cannot meet city demand and we cannot support some of the upstate communities. We will be working around the clock at a majority of these facilities. Our water supply center in Grahamsville is up and running 24/7 with alarms throughout the entire system, monitoring things very closely. In March of 2023, the DEP shut down the Delaware Aqueduct and drained the tunnel to an elevation of -90 feet below sea level to perform critical infrastructure and hydrological tests, the first such draining in nearly 70 years. An initial analysis from the shutdown showed potential groundwater infiltration into the tunnel at higher levels than originally anticipated. The DEP postponed the final bypass tunnel connection project by 12 months to augment construction site pumping capacity. Subsequent draining tests done in October of 2023 to -250 feet below sea level found infiltration subsided in a longer drawdown, with final infiltration rates closer to the original design plans. So this is a timeline. It's an example of the construction schedule and what it's going to look like, keeping in mind that there are many variables that go into the decision to move forward with the shutdown, such as weather, construction projects, and all decisions are made in real time as best as we can with the information that we have. So this is a bit of what you can expect from the construction schedule. The pre-outage period from June to September, this is when the reservoirs will start to draw down. In July, we are expecting contractors to mobilize and get on the site and get ready to go. October 1st is when the dewatering starts. From October 1st is when the dewatering of the Delaware Aqueduct starts. From October to May is when the big construction period will begin. This can take anywhere from 5 to 8 months. If we do not finish within the 8-month period, the Delaware Aqueduct will be brought back online. We do have provisions in our planning that if we are unable to complete the work, we will shut down again the following October. We will not be shut down for more than 8 months for more than an 8-month period. Again, depending on where we are in that 8-month period, in that 8-month process between October and May, it can take anywhere from 1 to 9 weeks to bring the Delaware Aqueduct back online. After the construction is complete, we need to do a rebalance to the water supply system. What does this mean? Normally, when we operate the system, we strive to draw the reservoirs down in a manner where they all have the same chances of refilling on June 1st. All the reservoirs are different and different shapes and sizes. They have different release capacities. They have different diversion capacities. That is why we do this by percentage. Our goal is to have them all filled by June 1st going into the summer, which is the highest demand season. The reservoirs get drawn down from there as we start using the water. We want to make sure, for example, that if we're going to start drawing down the Delaware system for this year for June 1st, we need to bring it down as far as we can before the shutdown in October. This is not normal operations for us. Typically, we would follow a pattern laid out in the flexible flow management program, where we would not be able to go below the 85% unless really dry. On a typical year, we strive to hit storage targets. However, we are going to work to bring the Delaware system down as much as we can, and we're really going to keep the Catskill and the Croton systems as full as we can. They will not be 100% full because even if we are hitting the Delaware system hard, we still have to use the Catskill and the Croton system a little bit to meet demand. During the shutdown, the Delaware system will start to fill back up. We will start making the releases. We won't be diverting any water, so we won't be using as much water. We're going to be utilizing the Catskill and the Croton systems fairly hard. Once the construction is complete, we are going to have to let the Catskill and the Croton system come back up to the point to where we'll be using the Delaware system fairly hard to rebalance the whole system. Depending on what hydrologic conditions look like, if it's normal conditions, if it's wet, if it's dry, there's a range to what all of those possibilities could look like. Again, all of these decisions are made in real time and all based off hydrologic conditions. I'm going to walk you through a series of graphs that are repeated with the same colors for the entire system. This gold line here is the average surface level over 63-year modeling period under normal conditions. This is the average surface level for 63 years worth of hydrologic records in the system. The blue line is what's modeled for the shutdown based on an average year with normal precipitation. And the yellow shaded background is the surface level operating range that we've seen over the last 63 years, the highs and the lows that we've seen during all types of conditions. The DEP doesn't have a crystal ball. We do not have advanced modeling, but we do have advanced modeling and forecasting tools. Our models are actually validated by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine and are called the most complex and advanced tools of its kind in the world. That report, if you're so inclined, is available on our website for you to take a look at. Our tools have been validated. Depending on rainfall, we are expected to draw down the Cannonsville, the Neversink, and Pepacton reservoirs 30% ahead of the shutdown. Typically, the lowest CSSO goes is the 85% line. So that 15% line is where we normally ride during the CSSO. We're going to actually get down 15% where we would normally be only about 30%. So the levels are going to go down a lot lower than normal. The goal at this time period between June and October is to draw the Delaware down, take it for diversion, while trying to preserve the Catskill and the Croton system so that we have storage available for the shutdown in October. Prior to the shutdown, the Cannonsville, Pepacton, and Neversink will be drawn down, leaving a substantial void for refill and spill attenuation. During system shutdown operations, releases from each of those reservoirs into the Delaware River tributaries will continue pursuant to the flexible flow management program. The gold line for the Pepacton is what the average condition would look like using the 63 years of records. The blue line is what we're expected to see the Pepacton look like during the shutdown, which is really not that far off from normal operations. The normal storage target is 85%, so we'll still be below that. The Neversink has the smallest release works out of the Pepacton and Cannonsville reservoirs. However, we are still able to manage it. The gold line is what you would see during an average year, and the blue line is what you will see during the shutdown. Moving along to the Rondout and the Cannonsville. Cannonsville has the biggest release works out of all of the reservoirs, and we're anticipating being able to get the level down to about 60% going into the shutdown. The gold line is the normal operations, but because the release works are so big, even in a wet year, we anticipate being able to hold Cannonsville's levels down during the shutdown while being able to refill it come the new water year. During the Delaware Aqueduct shutdown, three new temporary siphons will be used to help manage the Rondout Reservoir's surface elevation by enabling the release of as much as 260 million gallons per day. That's similar to the flow of a small creek into the Rondout Creek. Siphons cease operations within 1 foot of flood action stage on the Rondout Creek. The Neversink, Pepacton, and Cannonsville reservoirs all feed the Rondout Reservoir. The Rondout doesn't have a very big watershed of its own. It only has a yield of about 100 million gallons per day, so it doesn't have a lot of water necessarily feeding this reservoir for the size of it because the Neversink, Pepacton, and Cannonsville all feed it. It was designed that way. We plan to drop Rondout's levels and hold it steady throughout the course of the shutdown. The Rondout Reservoir is the start of the Delaware Aqueduct. The Rondout effluent chamber acts as both the start of the Delaware Aqueduct. The Rondout, it acts as the start of the Delaware Aqueduct, and which is also the diversion to New York City that acts as a release works. This is not the case for Cannonsville, Pepacton, and Neversink. They are different facilities. When the Rondout effluent chamber is shut down, because it's the start of the Delaware Aqueduct, we have to look for a way to evacuate water out of the Rondout. During the environmental review process, we took a hard look at whether or not siphons would be needed at all of the Delaware reservoirs because we would not be diverting water from them. Due to the fact that we can still evacuate water from Neversink, Pepacton, and Cannonsville, we're able to manage those through releases and normal releases through the flexible flow management plan. It was determined through a review process and extensive analysis that siphons were not needed at Neversink, Pepacton, and Cannonsville. But because there was no other way to evacuate water out of the Rondout while the Delaware was shut down, Rondout needed siphons so that we could be able to maintain the community releases downstream and provide ourselves with a way to evacuate water in the event that we did have a larger storm and we need to drain more water out of that reservoir. That is why Rondout is the only reservoir out of the Delaware system to get siphons. Delaware System Expanded Waterfowl Management Program. The Waterfowl Management Program is going to be expanded during the shutdown. This program did have its own environmental review process. The Rondout Reservoir is a terminal reservoir, so in the event that we have to do what we call reservoir gymnastics, we can send water directly from Rondout Reservoir to New York City by bypassing the rest of the system. We will be making sure that our waterfowl program is fully in place. It'll be a bit more robust down at Catskill Reservoir and some of the other places. So we just want to make people informed that you may be seeing us out on these reservoirs deterring birds. Delaware System recreational uses. Permitted boating and fishing activities from shore or boat will be permitted during the shutdown on all reservoirs. Some of the levels may be lower, but we're not putting any restrictions on the Delaware reservoirs. There are also no restrictions on land-based activities. Moving along to the rest of the system and what you can expect the Catskill to look like. East Shokan and West Shokan. The Ashokan has is a two-basin reservoir, the West Basin and the East Basin. We manage these concurrently. The gold line is the level you'll see during an average year over the past 63 years. The blue line is what is modeled for the shutdown. The Ashokan is going to get utilized more during the Delaware Aqueduct shutdown. Releases to the lower Esopus Creek leading up to and during the Delaware Aqueduct shutdown will continue pursuant to the interim release protocol, and DEP anticipates operating the Ashokan pursuant to the conditional seasonal storage objective of maintaining a 10% void after October 1st. Moving along to the Schoharie. The Schoharie Reservoir feeds into the Ashokan Reservoir. The Schoharie will be drawn down to use water for the Ashokan and to ensure that the Ashokan is full. The diversions from the Schoharie Reservoir are made through the Shandaken Tunnel to the Upper Esopus and are expected to continue. The Catskill system, this is the same waterfowl management system that we discussed earlier, and it will be implemented for the Catskill system. There will be no restrictions placed on the Catskill system for recreation during the shutdown. Outage operations for the Croton system. So we'll move along to the Croton system. Some of the biggest changes system-wide are going to be seen in the Croton system. The Croton system hadn't been used for about 20 years while we were building the filtration plant and has been used more regularly since it came on in 2015. It hasn't been used as hard as it's about to get used now. The Croton system is the oldest watershed in the city's water supply system. It will be tapped at full capacity during the Delaware Aqueduct period and treated as 4 separate subsystems. Additionally, pump stations will be supplemented. Pump stations will supplement water into the Delaware Aqueduct. These are the outage operations here. You can see all of the different reservoirs that make up the Croton system. Some of these reservoirs are going to get very, very low. The reservoirs on the Croton side are much smaller than they are on the Catskill side, and a lot of them actually feed into each other. Just like the Cannonsville, Pepacton, and Neversink all feed into the Rondout, all of these reservoirs over here that make up the Croton system all feed into each other. It's definitely a bit confusing of a system. So this is the West Branch and Boyd's Corners. West Branch and Boyd's Corners, the Rondout to West Branch is a section that is coming out of service for the Delaware Aqueduct that we've discussed. Normally, the West Branch Reservoir can be used as part of the Delaware system. For the purposes of this shutdown, these reservoirs are going to be our backup reserves. We're going to hold storage in both the West Branch and Boyd's. Boyd's feeds the West Branch. Boyd's water goes nowhere except into the West Branch. So this is going to be our reserve during the shutdown. That is why you're not seeing a lot of movement in these graph numbers here. This is what we're going to utilize this in the event that we need water. Moving down to Croton Falls. There is the Croton Falls Reservoir and the Croton Falls Diverting Reservoir. Again, one feeds into the other. There's going to be a lot of water moving from one to the other. This reservoir is going to come down to about 80% during the shutdown. These two reservoirs also feed down into the New Croton. So once again, these two reservoirs will get used more than normal. The East Branch is going to get it's going to get hit really hard during the shutdown. It's going to go down to about 25% storage during the shutdown. And we're hoping to be able to hold the storage at Middle Branch at about 80%. Moving along to the Croton Cross River. subsystem. Cross River and Titicus. Cross River is probably going to come down to about 60%. Titicus is going to come down to probably about 0. Moving along to the New Croton subsystem, the Muscoot and the Amawalk. A lot of these smaller reservoirs feed into the Muscoot, and that is why you won't see a lot of change, because the reservoirs where you're seeing the biggest changes are just feeding the other reservoirs where the line is being held. The Amawalk will be drawn down to about 60%. New Croton is the last stop before all the water gets sent down to the Croton filtration plant. All the smaller reservoirs that you saw before make up the Croton system, and they all feed into the New Croton. You notice that the gold and the blue lines are all held steady here because the Catskill Aqueduct is going to be feeding the Kensico. These are our last 2 stops before the water is sent to either the Croton filtration plant or through the UV plant, then on to Hillview, which is our balancing reservoir in Yonkers, where it then enters the distribution system. Croton system episodic taste and odor issues. One of the biggest challenges that we've had in recent years is that there's been episodic taste and odor issues in the Croton system. If you've ever noticed when it rains and sometimes you get that earthy, musty smell from the water hitting the dirt, you can kind of, smell those days. Sometimes that's what these people's water tastes like. There are 2 organisms in the water called MIB and geosmin, and these have created taste and odor issues. We realized that we were not the only people in the country to have this problem, so we worked with other partner utilities to figure out what we were doing and what we needed to do to mitigate taste and odor problems. So we had to change the filtration media at the plant, and we installed a granulated activated carbon, which we call GAC. This type of carbon filters out the 2 organisms so that we don't have taste and odor issues. Once again, there will be an expanded waterfowl management program, which is going to be really important, mostly for Kensico and Hillview. This program is going to be a bit more expanded, so we just wanted to make sure that people are aware, again, that you might see us out on the reservoir deterring birds. Croton system recreational use. Recreation is going to be impacted a bit in this area. We'll still permit fishing activities from shore or boat to when the storage is about 25% in all of the reservoirs, though, it's going to not really be safe to drag a boat down there. So there are going to be times when fishing is going to be restricted. There will be no restrictions on land-based activities. The in-stream discharges, the releases that we make to feed other reservoirs, those will also be decreased, so we will have to rely on the Croton system. We do not allow ice fishing on the west of Hudson reservoirs, but we do allow them on the east of Hudson reservoirs. Ice fishing, however, is going to be fully restricted during the winter east of Hudson, because when you're draining that much water, and you're draining it possibly fast, in some cases, you can get some ice buildup with gaps that make it unsafe for you to be out there. So we will be restricting ice fishing for the 2024-2025 season. We will continually post updates, though, on our DEP website regarding these changes. And I know this has been a lot of information, okay? This project has been more than 20 years in the making. There have been a lot of predecessor projects, a lot of environmental reviews, a lot of planning, people, oversight, and regulations, as well from the state and the federal government in order to get to this point. The water supply management plan is based on a really extensive computer modeling. We did the EIS back in 2015. We updated the modeling and continue to look at it daily. There's a big team who work behind the scenes on reservoir operations to help make this shutdown not even noticeable. And again, the goal is to be able to get through this shutdown without any issues.